more and more examples. So if you have any examples, please use the chat or raise your hands and tell me. Um, and as a final kind of gift, I guess, some of the books that have informed this practice and this lecture. I have a big interest in pirates because at the time the uh, model of self-organizations in pirate crews is an interesting kind of model based around equality and democracy. You can read The Invisible Hook is a wonderful book that talks about the captain and the quartermaster and how um, a pirate crew would organize and would vote, and it's actually much more democratic than anything else. Stealth of Nations is and The Misfit Economy, I think, are two amazing books that talk about uh, misfit innovators. So mainly people in the fringes like criminals, pirates, gangsters, other informal entrepreneurs that create new economic models. And I think it's really interesting because for criminals, innovation is an existential need. Because if you don't innovate, you'll get arrested, and that's the end of your company, right? So, yes, we can have ethical disagreements, but I think sometimes it's really impressive to see those terrible people create amazing solutions. An example of terrible people creating amazing solutions is the subject of Team of Teams. It's kind of a book of it's a book explaining how Al Qaeda managed to organize the September 11 terrorist attacks, and obviously, very terrible thing that happened. But on an organizational level, uh, and that's what General Stanley McChrystal talks about. They had never seen an army. Let's call it what it is. It's a terrorist army, Al Qaeda, that would minimize. That was very successful while minimizing communication. So this idea of terrorist cells, nobody knew who you. Imagine that you go to work and you don't know who you're working with until the day where you have to know who you're working with and what you're doing. So if you want to create a very lean organizational model where you optimize communication to the bare necessary, that looking into how Al Qaeda did it is interesting. They can teach us a lot, not ethics, but communication for sure. I've already mentioned The Master at the End of the World. I think it's one of the most interesting books about feral entities. Hyper Objects by Timothy Morton. Um, and Design Where When Everybody Designs by Ezio Manzini is also an amazing book that explains what we talked about with um, diffuse design capacity and professional design capacity, and how can we uh, change the role of the designer from a maker to a facilitator, from a solo practitioner to a medium for that type of people, which is exactly what Otto von Busch talks about in Making Trouble, Design and Material Activism, great book as well. Um, and the other two books, Bruno Latour's Rest in Peace, on the Cult of Factist Gods, is a very interesting kind of analysis of modernity and how science became the new religion. And The Undercommons is a very interesting book in how to do research with communities on liminal and subversive spaces. How can we look into those things and learn from them and approach them? And yeah, because traditional research models can't really work with. Like if I wanted to do a study on drug dealers, I couldn't go on my university's ethical approval framework and try to get them to sign paperwork and all that stuff, because yeah, that can't really work like that. So it's a very interesting question to ask: how can we do research in the fringes, and how can we learn from people that don't fall into how can I put the traditional boxes? that we usually face. So that was the main event. Thank you so much for your time. And again, thank you so much, Sergio, from the invitation and the opportunity. And yeah, if you have any questions or any comments or any thoughts, I would absolutely love to hear them. I will stop sharing my screen so I can see you. If you want to turn on your screens, now would be the perfect time so I can see your beautiful faces as well. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Spyros. No, Parakalo, and thanks for all the sharings. Spyros is asking also la pueden escribir en el chat, pueden también prender sus cámaras para que los conozca un poco y empezaremos con algunas preguntas. So we have already some questions. I have many personally. Let's start with maybe the basic ones. You know, how similar is this approach of feral design to the idea of grassroots innovations? What would you say about that?
I think it's very much inspired. I think grassroots innovations is one of the ways of getting inspired. I think grassroots innovation is very much connected with the diffuse design capacity. But I think that the difference has to do with this idea of self-negation, the fact that feral design aims to move us. It aims to change the systems of values. I think a lot of grassroots innovation, because it comes, well, from people that have an existential need. You know, for a farmer that wants a new, for example, crusher for wheat, it's not about changing, you know, the exploitative capitalistic economy or creating new ways of engaging with nature. Is as simple as I need to make flour. I think feral design aims to also address the values behind it. It wants to learn from grassroots innovation, but it also needs to position this within a value shift and tell the farmer that yes, that's really important. And also, we need to talk about how, for example, a company like Monsanto is using GMO seeds and is essentially exploiting you in this monoculture. And that is a problem. And we probably need to have a word with them. So I think there is overlap, but yeah, I think values is the main difference here, the shift in values.
Yeah, probably no the approach, but I see some similarities. Maybe there's some common ground between two. I'm gonna read now one question from the audience. This one is from Ariadna, and she's asking, how can we recover a sense of community and belonging in a world that is ever more individualistic and interconnected, but just through the digital technologies?
That's a great question. And I really wish I had a simple answer, but I wouldn't trust me if I had a simple answer. I think the answer is empathy, and the answer is reflexivity. It's about uh, going through those moments of empathy and togetherness, and kind of reflecting on how empty it feels when you're close to going to sleep. This light hits your face as you're slowly going to sleep, and you realize I have thousands of friends of Facebook, but no one is my friend. And I think as humans we're very forgetful, but we're also very energetic. And I think practicing empathy, practicing kindness, practicing love, being nice to each other. That almost sounds like a religious sermon, but that's the only thing that we can do. If we can, love is the most rebellious and biggest resistance, because it doesn't need money. It works outside that. It's not economically rational. So I think that's a big traditional wisdom that used to guide human societies that in capitalism we've kind of forgotten. But as biological beings, we're kind of we can't escape empathy. Uh, Digital technologies and alienation makes us feel alone in order to make us not be empathetic. So just talking to people, being nice to people, I think is the most subversive thing that you can do. And just remembering that, getting people to realize that, and maybe they will do more of that. And hopefully, we will talk to each other more instead of uh, going on Twitter and getting angry, I guess.
Mm, that's beautiful. And we were using one quote um, in the in the ad that we were making, and the banner that we were making for this conference, where you're saying that at the end of the world, all we have is each other. So yeah, it goes back to that idea of let's not rely too much in the just the technology, but in the people behind it and the network that we can have around it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you ask a UI UX designer, Camus was talking about Sisyphus, and we have to imagine Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill happy. UI UX will tell you, oh yeah, if we add a counter at the bottom of the hill that counts how many times did the rock get to the top and then roll down, that would make Sisyphus happy. And it's like, I think you're missing the main part of the story here.
Hmm. I don't know if you've been using also some references from Arturo Escobar, but in his latest book called Relationality, he's talking about that, no, the power of being together, or this togetherness, no, the working along. So I think it's a beautiful perspective for design, no, maybe from that perspective of sociology, but towards the design and our practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think relationality is one of those big words that we need to explore more, and they have that capacity uh, to change and to be better.
Perfect. We have another question from Jerry, Gerardo. He is asking, how can we change the behavior of people using the ideas of feral design to reduce the environmental crisis? Oh, it's a tough one.
Oh, it's quite easy actually. However, I would say I disagree a bit with the question. I would say that it's not our job to change the behavior of people. It's our job to help them decide changes in their own behaviors that better align with their values, their goals, and what makes them happy. And I think the thing that feral design and participatory co-design approaches have to offer is empowerment. It's about getting people to shift from a passive way of engaging with the world where we're just going through the motions and other people decide things for us, and we just we shrug because it's the economy, that's politicians, that's big companies, to telling people through design and through action that you can take um, you can take ownership of your life. You can act in ways that change things that might be small, but those small things have the capacity to become bigger and bigger and bigger. So I would say that as designers, it's not what we do in order to change people's behavior, but it's how we enable them to have moments of clarity and crystal thinking, and they find the ways to change their behavior. All we have to do is convince them that you can change your behavior, you're allowed to change your behavior, you can act in ways that change the world around you. And I think that's, again, the most simple and interesting thing. Uh, Behavioral change is very hard. We see a lot of great design projects that claim to do behavioral change, and they're kind of small scale fireworks. But for example, you know this line: "There is nothing more radical than planting a garden." uh, in the city of Detroit. It's a very interesting case study. It used to be the biggest auto manufacturing city in all of the United States. When American manufacturing started to collapse in the 80s and the 90s, the city has been bankrupt, I think, 5 times. The population went from around 5 million to 500,000. And because it was a city full of industrial workers, no one knew how to grow a tomato. So there was a huge movement towards allotments and essentially people in the neighborhoods taking over empty liminal spaces, turning them into gardens, teaching each other how to cultivate the land instead of wait. People started making their own food and they were empowered to do that. So knowledge, agency, into meaningful change. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest lie, that we don't have agency. We have agency, and little things can change the world much more and much faster than big things. So I think it's more about how we practice design, how we look at people, how we engage with people, and how we use our design capacity. But walk with me so we can change the world together.
That's great. And it brings another question that I want to say, with this example of Detroit that you are mentioning. Um, it has to do with the similarities and differences between feral design and biodesign. Um, but in biodesign, thinking as biodesign not only as this idea of how do we use biomaterials, how do we make it out of potato starch and sell it. No, this is more developed idea of biodesign of sovereignty. How do we produce our own resources and how do we collaborate with nature, and putting them as equals, and um, how can we have that radical collaboration with them that we start to rewildering this environment and our cities. Um, I think it has to do a lot, or for me, it always sounds a little bit similar whenever I read your articles or I hear your proposals, that it has to do with giving space also for the wild, for the feral, to arise, and to see not how do we use it in our favor, but how do we um, include ourselves in that system that is already given by nature, no, or wild by itself. Um, what is your opinion? How do you see these similarities and differences?
I think that's a very interesting question. I agree in principle, and I think, in a sense, it's part of what we've missed. Because wouldn't you say all of design is biodesign? I mean, it's done by biological creatures. It us. It's it uses resources from nature, be it wood or rocks or petrol. It all comes from nature. It's all natural, and
Yeah,
we've kind of created this false dichotomy where there is the human and the non-human. And while that is true categorically, it's a bit of a dangerous typology. We tend, if we see it, it gives us a black and white lens to look into the world, and that might be unfair for the world, because there is a lot of gray and there is a lot of color. And I think this idea of relationality, this idea of a world of many centers, this idea of pluriversal kind of thinking, a pluriversal design, um, is very important. And I don't like definitions. I think definitions are like taxidermy. You have this beautiful animal full of grace, full of movement, full of life. And in order to preserve it, and in order to be able to say, look at the tiger, you kill it, you remove all of its beauty, grace, and life, you freeze it. And yes, that's useful to have it frozen in time, but it's a simulacrum. It's not a tiger anymore. It's a man-made image of what a target tiger should look like. So for me, kind of being more promiscuous, being more flexible, being more able to move around and have wiggle room around words and definitions, I think that's very important. And it might shock you, but when we have these kind of discussions around definitions, and it's one of the discussions I personally hate when people go like, "Oh, is this art or design?" I'm like, it's whatever, man. It's like, who cares? It is what it is. I always go, you know how the USA Supreme Court defines pornography? They define it as you'll know it when you see it, right? That something that is, the difference between a documentary where people are fornicating to show how this works and pornography is eroticism. It's what you'd say, young people would call the vibes. It's like if you watch it and it makes you feel like either you shouldn't be watching or you know aroused, it's probably pornography. If you're watching it, you're like, wow, that's really interesting. Look at that. Then it's a documentary. So if kind of the highest authority that we have in providing definitions is okay with such a uh, fluid definition of something, I think we can learn from that and apply that to many things. It's design or art. It's whatever it is. It can be both. It's why do we need to define it? Does it feel like design? If it feels like design, it's design. Does it feel like art? If it feels like art, it's art. It's not an either or.
Yeah, I always use the reference of the lichen over there. No, that is, it doesn't fit into boxes. No, it's not either a mushroom or an algae. No, it's the relationship between both of them. No, so it's becoming all the time.
Yeah, and that's where things are more interesting because those things that fall outside the boxes are actually the most interesting things and the most engaging things. So yeah, let's work around the boxes. Who cares
Yeah,
about?
I agree. Well, I think if anybody wants to open the mic or open the cameras and bring a question to the table, this is the moment. Si alguien quiere compartir una pregunta y abrir su cámara o abrir su micrófono, este es un buen momento, sino para empezarnos a despedir. Well, we're gonna also put the conference in our YouTube channels, so I'm gonna send you later the link. And I also wanted to thank you for all the for being generous enough to share all those books. That looks amazing. Some of them are well known, some of them are like a new treasure that you're bringing. And I want to pay back also with that idea because I think this book is similar in this sense of the feral design. No, it's called When Plants Are Doing Whatever They Want. By this French guy Dusan Cacique. Probably you can find it in French. I'm sure that there's an English translation or a Greek even. But it's beautiful because he's sharing his research path. It's a PhD research where he started to just wanted to research the communities of gardeners and people that is producing food in the fields and the restaurants in France. And then later he discovered how the people is having this beautiful relationship with the plants, and allowing them to do whatever they want so that they can learn from them. So it's a very feral teaching from the plants, to the people.
That's amazing. Thank you for that gift. I will check it out.
Well, and thank you also for the conference. I think we are already on time and want to be respectful from your time. I hope that we can keep on talking. I really feel that we have many subjects similars and that we can also bring it to our students. So let's keep on talking. Let's keep on sharing our research, and hopefully we can have more of these conferences and time together.
Absolutely. And please, if you have any thoughts or comments or questions or anything, don't hesitate to reach out. You have my contact information. If you don't, Sergio can share them. Don't be afraid to reach out. I think I'm very, very accessible. So yeah, just send me an email. Don't worry about it. And thank you again, Sergio, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to talk about things I'm passionate about. So yeah, thank you for that.
Mhm. Well, thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you soon over here.
Yeah, have a great day and have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a great weekend. Gracias a todos por participar por aquí y nos vemos en la próxima.